Welcome back to the Monimate Podcast. Take a breath with me for a second. You're here because you care about stability. Not noise, not hustle, not financial theater. Real structure, real clarity, real controls. If this is your first time listening, I am Hope. Before we begin, two quick things. Marcus will be back next episode. We're going deeper into structural resilience and long-term income architecture. And in episode 10, we'll be joined by Divine E. Hayes, founder and CEO of Monimate Technologies. That conversation will be different, more architectural, more about system design at its origin. So, stay with us. Now, today is about something subtle and quietly powerful: recovery windows. The stretch after financial pressure peaks, the part most people rush through, the part that quietly determines how stable you actually are. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had a tight week and then payday hits? And instead of feeling calm, you feel exhausted? Not relieved, just tired. That feeling matters because recovery is not the absence of pressure. Recovery is the return to safety. And if safety is unclear, your nervous system never fully stands down. It keeps scanning, it keeps waiting, even when the numbers look fine. Most people focus on pressure peaks, the rent due, the cluster of bills, the low balance moment. That's visible, that's trackable. Most financial tools are built around it. But what actually shapes long-term stability is what happens after. How long does it take you to stabilize? How clearly can you see that stabilization happening? And how much does it cost you emotionally to get there? That's the recovery window. Let's define it properly. A recovery window is the period between the peak of financial pressure and the moment your system returns to structural safety, not just balance above zero. Structural safety, meaning you can absorb a small disruption without panic. That's the real marker, not the number, the capacity. Here's where most people go wrong. They survive the pressure peak, they pay the bills, they breathe, and they immediately resume normal spending without checking whether they actually recovered. That's like sprinting, resting for 2 seconds, then sprinting again. It works until it doesn't. Let me make this concrete. Imagine your rent hits on the 1st, insurance on the 3rd, credit card on the 5th. You dip low, payday lands on the 7th, balance climbs, you feel okay. But are you recovered, or are you simply not in immediate danger? Those are different states. Recovery means your buffer is rebuilt, your timing gap is closed, your next obligation cluster is absorbable, without borrowing from the future. The moment payday lands is not recovery, it is the beginning of recovery. This is where anxiety quietly forms, because many people operate in partial recovery, not full recovery. They survive, but they don't stabilize. And that means the next pressure window arrives before the previous one fully healed. That creates chronic low-level vigilance, which feels like, I'm always slightly behind, even when you're not. There are 3 things that determine how fast you recover: buffer depth, timing clarity, obligation spacing. We've touched on these before. Today we connect them specifically to recovery. Buffer depth is not about having a large emergency fund. It's about having enough liquidity to re-enter calm territory after a pressure event. If payday only brings you back to just above zero, you are not recovered. You're balanced on a wire. Recovery requires margin, even small margin. A few $100s beyond your immediate obligations changes what your nervous system does. Timing clarity is about knowing when. With a salary, recovery is predictable. You know when income returns. With irregular income, recovery feels ambiguous. You survive one pressure peak, but you can't confidently declare yourself stable because you don't know when the next income arrives. That uncertainty keeps your brain scanning, even in good weeks. That's exhausting. Obligation spacing is about design. If your obligations cluster again immediately after payday, you get relief, but not stabilization. Spacing matters, sequence matters. Where your bills land relative to your income is something you can shape over time. Now, what does healthy recovery actually feel like? It feels boring. Calm, uneventful. It feels like not thinking about money for 3 days. That's it. That's the signal. Not dramatic, not euphoric, just quiet. And that quiet is the goal. Fast recovery builds confidence. Slow recovery builds fragility. If it takes you 3 weeks to rebuild margin after every pressure peak, you live in compression. If it takes you 3 days, you live in control. Recovery speed defines resilience, not income size, not net worth. Speed. And here's the part that changes things. Recovery is engineerable. It is not random. It is not just what happens to you after bills clear. You shape it by pre-building post-peak margin, by shifting minor expenses out of the first 10 days, by keeping income expectations conservative enough that reality lands ahead of the line, and most importantly, by not treating payday as permission. Payday is not freedom. It is the start of stabilization. Freedom comes after stabilization. That sequence matters more than most people realize. I want to address something psychological. Some people unconsciously rush recovery. They feel deprived during the pressure period. And when income lands, they compensate. That's human. That's normal. But if the compensation erases the margin you need to actually stabilize, you've reset the cycle. Not intentionally. But the effect is the same. Recovery doesn't ask for restriction. It asks for patience. A few days of margin building before the spending resumes, that window is small and worth protecting. Let's talk about visibility. Because visibility reduces anxiety more reliably than any specific financial tactic. You should be able to answer this question at any moment. If income stopped today, how many days until structural instability begins? That number is your runway. And every recovery window should aim to extend it, even slightly. 5 days, 7 days, 10 days. That growth is slow, and it compounds. And after a while, you stop feeling like you're 1 week away from pressure, because you're not. I want to pause here. Because this is where people expect something complex. There isn't anything complex. Recovery is margin, clarity, spacing, repeated, over time. The design is simple. The discipline is in not skipping the window. If you feel like you're always surviving but never stabilizing, you are likely exiting pressure windows too early. Before the margin is rebuilt, before the runway has extended, that's fixable. Not with hustle, with design. With the decision to treat recovery as a phase, not a moment. Stability shift. This week. After your next payday, don't look at your monthly total. Look at the next 10 days. Ask, if no income arrived again for 10 days, would I remain calm? If the answer is no, that's your recovery gap. Now you know exactly what to build. Before we close, I want to normalize something. If you've been living in constant recovery mode, you're not weak. You're likely operating in a structure that was never designed for full stabilization. Most financial tools focus on spending categories, not recovery design. That's why this feels new. That's why it isn't your fault. But now you see it, and that changes what you can do. Marcus will be back next week. We'll expand this into long-term recovery architecture, how recovery windows connect to income architecture, and why high earners so often misread their own stability. And in episode 10, you'll hear from Divine Ehiz, founder and CEO of Monimate Technologies. System level, vision level, still grounded. I'm Hope. And this is the Monimate Podcast, built on trust, powered by intelligence. See pressure early, stay in control. I'll see you next week.